All right, Ashley, thanks for joining us today on the podcast. And we were just talking offline about you got three little kids, right? You're a
Right.
relatively new CEO, and woof, that's a lot, right? That's a lot to digest. So maybe we could start there. How do you think about leadership? And by the way, with a small little pandemic going on, probably your first. So, how do you think about leadership given all that, right? All that's going on in your life?
It's a lot to juggle. And I think leadership takes the form in many ways. So, leadership of the household, leadership of a company. And then, like you said, we're going through a whole new thing for everybody. I've only been a CEO for 4 years. So it's been a lot of learning in 4 years, very, very quickly. My kids are 4, and 2. And so they've kind of grown with me in this position. My 4-year-old, I actually had him. He was born 4 days before my predecessor resigned, and so when I took over the position, he was brand new. So having a newborn at home and taking over a company, it was quite a lot, and it was overwhelming, and it was a point in my life where I was pretty doubtful about my ability to even really do this. Is this something I can even do, or should I do it? Is this really in my wheelhouse to be able to do? I'm a trained clinician. I'm a psychologist by trade. And so to come in and say, well, you're going to be the CEO and run this organization it was a lot. It was a lot to think about. And it took some guidance. The former CEO really helped me through some of that, and him and I still talk, and we're still in good communication. And we have a great team that I work with that helped help me understand the position and where the company was going. And after, I would say, about a year, maybe 2 years, I was able to then really take the reins and say, okay, all right, now I know where we're going. Now I know where we need to go and how we need to get there. But it was slow at first, and it was a lot, and it's pretty scary to start with, for sure.
I love
Yeah.
that. I love the honesty already. It was scary. It was challenging. It was a bit overwhelming. You doubted yourself initially. So maybe take us back to that a little bit, and what was going through your mind at that time, and for other leaders out there who are maybe new to the CEO gig, what was going through your mind?
I think it's always that self-doubt that I tend to have, is that, is this really something I can do? Do I really have these abilities? My husband would tell you, absolutely, you can do any of this. Of course you can. And I always look at him like, I don't know. Are you sure? But I think it's somewhat human nature to kind of look at ourselves and say, that might be for everybody else, but I don't know if I can do it. And what if I fail? What if I fail and there's 200 people's lives that I'm failing at? Because that's how many people work at our company, and that's a big weight to carry. Of, if I fail, I'm failing 200 people plus the 4,300 client or 5,300 clients we serve every year. And so that was the initial, like, oh crap, this is really, really big. But then as you start walking through it and you kind of get in there and you start talking to people, it's like, what decision are you going to make that's really going to wreck the lives of every client you serve and every employee you serve? I mean, that would be pretty big. So, it does take a little perspective taking also to say, okay, I'm one person in this grand scheme of this whole organization. Yes, decisions have a lot of influence, a lot of weight, but there's a lot of other components at play here. And so then it is about kind of stepping back and looking at reality, and not just the oh shit factor that kind of kicks in, I think, sometimes when you're in a really big decision place.
Yeah, there's a little bit of, oh boy, I'm getting feedback on my mic here. There's a little bit of, well, I'm just one person of 200, so how much damage can I really do, right? At the end of the day, that's
Right.
that's part of it, which is a good insight. But the other part, I think I picked up on that, was this fear of failure, and
Mhm.
and that when you were able to realize it and make that fear from the unconscious level to a much more conscious, like, oh, okay, you know what? Actually, that fear I have of letting down 200 people's lives is not really founded in reality. That's not really a valid concern. And as soon as I'm able to recognize that fear and bring it from my unconscious to my conscious, then I can say, oh, okay, that's not really something I really need to be concerned about. I'm curious, what other sorts of fears like that have you had to wrestle with through your leadership career?
Oh, it's kind of, I think that's just part of been my life, honestly, I went to college and was kind of told by a professor that, you probably want to go look for a job. I don't know if grad school is going to be right for you. And that was my initial, like, well, screw you, I'm going to go to grad school, and so sometimes that doubt coming from external would push me to do things people told me I couldn't do. But then I'd get to grad school and it was like, geez, maybe this isn't for me. And it was really hard. And I think that self-doubt is there quite a bit until I can kind of prove to myself that, yeah, you got this. Like, and I think it takes that learning curve. It takes that, that example of, oh my gosh, I'm going to screw this up so bad that everything's going to fall apart. Well, maybe it's just making one mistake and seeing, well, it doesn't really fall apart. We just got to learn from it, and you just got to move on to the next thing and figure out how to grow and change from that. And so I think throughout my life, it's just been, okay, what can I take from this? And how do I improve? How do I keep learning? And how do I keep growing? And how do I make change? Because I can't take myself from 10 years ago and put that person in this position, because it never would have worked. And I don't know where I'm going to be in 6 years, hopefully in a better place. And, as a person, but that's not who I am now. And so I think it's about growing and changing and learning. And that's been the biggest thing for me is I don't have all the answers. I don't know. And being able to say, I don't know has been really hard for me, because I think in grad school, I wanted to be known as somebody that knows things. You know things. You have, you now have a doctorate degree, things. And so in a leadership position, I think there's this expectation either from ourselves or from the people that we work with that, well, as the leader, you should know, you should have all the answers. And it's taking me some time to understand that it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that. Let's figure out how to explore that together, because I don't have the answer. And to be okay with that and sit with that discomfort.
Your team, when you're able to take that step back and to say, I don't know, let's figure this out together. What does that do for your team that you've seen?
I think it empowers folks to be able to say, oh, well, I think we all need to think of this together, and not to look at me as the end all be all decision maker and dropping the hammer down to say, this is how it's going to be all the time. I think it just enables people to really problem solve, to think on their feet, to know that I'm not going to just dictate and direct everything that comes to us, that we as a team need to solve this together. And especially now with COVID, there's so many unknowns. There's just so many things that we just don't have the answers to. And sometimes we just need to sit with, this is going to be really uncomfortable, and we're going to need to really navigate it together, and not have all the answers up front. And we can fail as a team. We can make mistakes, and we'll keep going. So it's kind of that permission to try things and know that it's probably not going to be perfect at first, and we'll just keep trucking along and seeing how we go.
Yeah, I find it said we several times, this whole idea of we, the team, if we do this together, then we can't really fail. We can have missteps. We can do some things maybe in a way that wasn't as productive. But if we are a team, then there's really is no failure. We just keep, failing forward in essence. And I would suggest that one of the key responsibilities of a really good leader is to grow their people. And what I hear in that is that by removing your ego, by removing this, like, I got it all figured out, and saying, I don't have it all figured out, you're actually allowing other people to step up and to grow and to wrestle with these things. And in so doing, you're empowering your team. You're literally putting the power of thinking into their brain so that they can think. And together we can figure out what are some possible strategies going forward.
Exactly.
What do what do you do on that front when you think about clearly growing and learning? You've got lots of degrees, and um, I would guess you're even younger than me, and I'm really young, and have accomplished all these great things. How do you think about growth and personal development? What role does that have for you as a individual, for your organization, for your team?
It's huge for me. I think the minute you stop trying to learn, the minute you stop trying to grow, trying to just be a better human, you just kind of stop being a human. And I think no matter how old you are, you should always have a goal. You should always have something you're striving towards. And for me, it's often reading. It's meeting new people and gaining their experience and their their expertise on something. I love books, so I read a lot of books. I watch podcasts or listen to podcasts, watch videos of people. But it's so important, and I just think there's always a place for us to inspect what are we not doing well and how can we do better. I'm a therapist, of course, so that's also a part of our work in therapy is how can we just be better people? How can we be better humans, either for ourselves or for those around us? And I think there's always a place for that for everybody. So, therapy, here's another, soapbox. Therapy isn't just for when you're not doing well. It can be for when you're doing well and you just want to figure out your next goal or figure out what can you be doing better at in this area because I'm struggling in this little area. So it doesn't have to be this big crisis, I think, that people think it has to be. So
yeah,
important.
And it can be about the future too.
Absolutely.
From here. So speaking of the future, what about your organization? What's sort of the inspiring goal that you're excited about as you think about the next 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, COVID has definitely put a spin on everything. It's hard to think that far down the line. But one of the things we're really working towards is becoming a center of excellence for substance use and mental health. And for us, that really means being a one-stop shop. If somebody comes in our door, we should be able to offer them any service or get them care coordination into any service that they need. And so we're really working towards being that center of excellence for mental health and substance use disorder in our region in Minnesota. And it's a lot of change. It's a lot of shifting. It's a lot of, helping people understand that why, and here's how we're shifting this, and here's the importance to our clients and our community. And changes, I love change. So I'm one of those people that just love to kind of throw the whole idea out there and let's just see what sticks. And I know that scares a lot of people as well. So it's trying to find some balance in that as a leader of don't move too fast, but you got to push and move fast enough to get the change going. And one of the things I've learned with this and worth working with all of you has been that why is so important, and maybe over communicating that why and continuing to keep that in front of people, because otherwise people get stuck in the detail of this, I don't want to make this change. And if you can keep that why and keep the mission in front of people, it really helps to push forward and get rid of some of the stories people tell themselves about what's happening. Can help reduce some of that non-reality, I think, that we can all shove into our heads. So
yeah, which is what we people do. We're quick to make stories in our heads that make a lot of sense to us, but aren't actually based in reality.
Yes. One of my favorite quotes is that life is, how does it go? Life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of the stories we tell ourselves. And it's just so true. And I think being part of being leader of a company or anything is helping people to really separate that.
Yeah.
Is that really what happened? What did you really hear? What were the words that were said? And what are you telling yourself about all of that? And what are you reacting to? Are you reacting to the story that you've made up in your head about all of this? Or are you reacting to, the fact that Tom walked in the room? Like, what is the reaction here? And I think that's a big part of coaching and leadership, is helping people to really separate that out and figure out how to themselves be better leaders.
Yeah, it reminds me of that Mark Twain quote. He says something to the effect of, "I've known many a trouble in my life, and most of them never came true." That we catastrophize, we make up all sorts of problems, we worry about all sorts of things, and the reality is most of those worries never come true, and yet we waste all this emotional energy on processing things that never come to fruition, never actually happen. And CEOs, I think, are no different in this regard. In some cases, I think CEOs have sometimes a bigger challenge with this, a bigger sort of imposter syndrome, or fear of failure, or fear of not looking smart enough, or fear of not having all the answers. I'm curious for you and in your experience as CEO, what comes up for you around this subject?
Yeah, I think some of that has been not having all the answers, not doing it right, as if there's a right or wrong way to necessarily lead. I've learned that's not accurate, but I think that's a piece of that perfectionism of there's got to be a right way, and I'm going to figure out how to do it. And letting some of that go has been freeing, scary at first, but freeing. Yeah, and I think that not having all the answers, being willing to admit that I don't know, I don't have those answers, and that again, it was difficult at first of letting go of some of that ego that I have to do it right. I have to know what to say. I have to, have everything kind of perfect in how this is going to be delivered before we can even move on anything. And it gets paralyzing. Like you feel like you have to have it all right before you make any steps forward. You just stay stuck. And then nothing's moving. And then you kind of are failing. So it can kind of create its own monster. So I think being able to recognize those things and letting as much as you can go. But I also know I'm still very stubborn with a lot of things, and I can let my ego get in the way too. And I can do that same thing, right? I can start telling stories to myself about, well, I'm sure that's what this person means. And then I can start reacting to that. And I have to catch myself in that because it can turn very poisonous very fast. And so even though as a psychologist, I know those things, as a leader, I know those things, I still get caught up in them. I still do it. And it's that awareness and taking a step back. And again, not, when I'm stressed out or I'm thinking about something, I tend to write my emails at 2 a.m. I've learned to not push that send button at 2 a.m. I've learned to look back at that email and look at it from a different perspective and say, okay, is that reality, or am I responding to something? So it's some of those pieces that you just kind of learn as you go and figure out the best way to do it with the time that you're in.
Well, you're building all that on the premise of noticing it, of awareness, which I would argue is the hardest part, is to how do we even notice that we're being triggered or we're having a reaction to something. So as a psychologist, as someone who's trained in this professionally, what advice do you give us humans, the rest of us humans out here, on how do we even notice this? How do we even notice when we're having a moment like this?
Well, I can tell you that I have not noticed it on my own. Sometimes it has been other people saying, are you okay? Because something's going on. So, I think it's about having people you trust and allowing them to give you that feedback and being open to it. There were times where I was not open to that. I was not willing to hear it because it was scary and painful, and my ego was too big to hear it. And so it is about knowing who you can accept that feedback from and who you trust to give that to you, and then being willing to hear it. And I think the more you're willing to do that, the more you are going to start to notice these things in yourself. And then you could start to kind of laugh about them at times because, you can see the pain that maybe you cause other people. But in the end, these folks are really trying to help you grow and trying to show things to you that you maybe never would have noticed before. So I think that's a big piece, is having a circle of people around you that you trust, that you can give them feedback, they can give you feedback, and you're willing to hear it and willing to make some changes because of it, even if it's really painful and really hard to hear. They just have to be willing to do that.
Yeah, it's great for all the leaders out there, all CEOs in particular, to find a group of folks that you can really lean on in a regular way. I was a part of a CEO group for 5 or 6 years. Obviously now you're a part of our interchange group, which is a group of CEOs from across the country that come together to support each other and to help each other. And if you're not in one of those sorts of groups, go out and find one immediately, because it's a lonely job. It's a tough job, and you need some folks that you can lean on and rely on. What advice would you offer up to other leaders out there who are maybe not in a group like that yet?
Oh, find one. You have to find one. You have to find peers that you can, even if it's just commiserate and say, do you have any experience with this? And just to have other people say, oh my gosh, me too. It's like, oh, thank goodness, I'm not alone. I'm not alone in this fear that I don't know how to handle this, or this has come up and we're not sure what to do about it. I think sometimes just having that knowledge that there's other people out there that are going through the same thing is so powerful. It just helps validate that, okay, I'm not alone in this, and I can, I have other people that can maybe help me. And it's very powerful. So find it where you can. There's a lot of places to go to get that, but I think finding it wherever you can is so important. And it, I think it's not just other peers that are in the same profession, but it can also be family. Being willing to get some feedback from your family about how you're handling your personal life too is super important, and being willing to hear that, because we might be doing amazing in our business life, but we might be sucking at it in our personal life. So, I think there's that balance there too, that we need to make sure we're keeping a good balance for ourselves, because everybody's watching us as the leaders. We got the microscope on, and if we're not taking good care of ourselves, we're sending a message to our staff that you don't need to either. And so it is about that balance as well.
Yeah. And knowing what I know about you, that probably the most important is your 3 little kids, right? That you are leading them in who you're being, and taking care of yourself or not taking care of yourself, taking care of them or not being present for them, being present for your spouse or not being present. All those things send huge messages, and it's not either or. It's not the business or personal life. It's how do you be really intentional with your life so that you can do both and more, effectively.
Exactly. Yep.
And for those of you who are looking for a group, I'd encourage you to find one that actually produces an open dialogue. There's lots of groups out there that are sort of intellectual, meaning they bring in expert speakers and they'll talk about interesting topics, but it's sort of surface level. It doesn't get down to the root of who we are as humans and helping each other. So there's some unsolicited advice for our readers.
And I would agree with that. It's so important to be able to voice and have a discussion about what you're experiencing, and not just hear from somebody what they think you should be experiencing or what you should be doing. It's really important to be able to voice that and have those conversations. I agree.
So a couple more questions, Ashley, and then one more question, then I'll get to your book recommendation. For leaders out there, for maybe young leaders, folks who want to become a CEO someday, want to become a school superintendent, want to become an executive director, maybe a president, what advice would you give them?
I think I never saw myself in a role like this. So I think there's probably different people out there. Some people that really see themselves in a leadership role, and others that maybe don't. And I think being open to experiences, being willing to try new things, even when they scare you, because you never know where it's going to take you. And so being open to change, being open to whatever life kind of throws at you and running with it is huge, because you just don't know what that opportunity could lead to. And what kind of a leadership position that might lead you into, and how you could develop that and just be a better person. So openness, I think, is huge. Being willing to face change is so important, and being flexible and adaptive. As a leader, you just have to have those skills, and you have to learn how to do that. You cannot be somebody who stays the same forever and ever and ever and is never willing to try something new. So flexibility adaptiveness, willingness, all those things are so important. So learning those skills early.
Yeah, a little bit easier said than done, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So what book would you recommend to the listeners out there?
This is a hard one. There's so many good ones, but one of my favorites recently has been Reality-Based Leadership by Cy Wakeman. Fantastic book. Covers a lot of the things we've been talking about today, but it really is about, as a leader, how do we reduce drama? How do we keep people and keep their egos in check? How do we help build leaders and have more of a coaching culture in our organizations? A quick read, very easy to read. I mean, it's not, it's something that it's just the information, right? It's not all these anecdotal things that you have to really think about. It's just, here's what you do. And so it can help you really just take some things and really practical information that you can apply pretty quickly. But there's a lot of it in there. So
yeah. Got some wonderful videos of her talks too on the topic of drama. I found it fascinating. What was it like? Something like 2 or 2.5 hours every single day is spent on drama related activities in most organizations. 2.5 hours a day. Like, it's mind boggling.
The amount of energy and time we spend, it's amazing. It really, really is. And when you think of how quickly you get there, I mean, I've sat back and thought, oh, wow, I got there really quick. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about this now when I don't even know what's true or false about this. And so it's really taking that reality check and stepping back and figuring out, what am I reacting to? One of the things she talks about in there too, I think that is really great as a leader, is you react to the person in front of you. And so if a staff person brings you something about another staff person, it's really easy to get engaged in that and to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Sally did that. And can you believe it? Blah, blah, blah. Instead of saying, Tom, you're bringing me this problem. What is it? How did you affect Sally to make this problem happen? And so it's really kind of confronting the person in front of you and not talking about the other person that they maybe were trying to bring into the situation. So it really is getting back into what's happening right now in the moment and that mindfulness perspective, instead of getting caught up in all the drama. So
which is wonderful.
Really good. Yeah.
Wonderful gift. It's a wonderful coaching technique of not allowing the person to go on dramatizing or talking about the other person. I'll say over and over again to clients, that's great, but I'm not coaching that person right now. I'm coaching you.
Yes.
So how are you contributing this? How can I help you? What are your thoughts on what we do going forward? How do you go about building a relationship? It's people don't love it at first, but it's a great gift because they realize, oh, I'm just contributing to the problem, and it's what we humans do. We like to gossip. We like to talk to each other. We like to build relationships and talk about other folks. But at the end of the day, as leaders, we don't get that choice. We don't get that, in my opinion, we don't get that scapegoat. We have to deal with things and move forward.
Yeah, I think sometimes we also like to look at a problem and really admire that problem and hold it up and talk about it, and but never really want to have a solution for it. We just want to admire it. And we have staff that want to do that. And so I think it really brings people back into that solution-based model of, okay, now what are we going to do about it? Like, let's come up with some ideas, because if we're not going to have ideas about how to fix it, then we don't need to talk about it. So
my sister-in-law, she said this to me probably 10 years ago. She said, so Tom, is that a problem that you want to have, or is that a problem you want to solve? And it hit me right between the eyeballs. And I've used it thousands of times since then, because it's what we do. We like to have and admire problems, right? It's easier than having to actually deal with them and do something about it. And as leaders, that's our job, is to not have the problems, but do something about them, to help make forward progress.
Yeah.
So actually, we could keep going. I could tell for another hour, but we're not going to do that because we both have other commitments, and I appreciate your time today, and just thanks for being on.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.